that has wreaked havoc across the world and has totally changed the way we relate, the way we interact as human beings. And that's why today on Around the Table show, we felt the need to give you an overview and update on COVID-19. Today, I'm glad to be joined by Dr. Daniel Odongo, a medical officer. Welcome, Dr. Daniel, on the show.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth.
Please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and good morning, viewers. My name is Dr. Daniel Odongo, and I work at the Mater Hospital, where we have been handling so many of the cases of COVID-19 disease. And so we have done some of these things over and over, and I think it's important for the community to get to know some of the things which are coming up, and then to remind them on some of the things that they already knew. Because currently, it is true, we have all got to understand that people are like getting used to COVID-19, which is not the way it is supposed to be. So I think as we go on with the discussion, we'll give the public the right information, which should be able to help us.
Thank you very much, and welcome. So we feel the need to give you just an overview of what COVID-19 is. Please, doctor, remind us, what is COVID-19 and how is it transmitted from one person to another?
Yeah, so right from the beginning of this year, that was during this December 2020, December 2019, when the first case was reported in China. So the transmission started spreading all over the world, and before we knew it, every country in the world had got the infection. And so when the first case landed in Kenya in March this year, everyone panicked, and you know, everyone was running up and down. People didn't know what to do, but I am happy now, at least people know what to do. But so coronavirus is, COVID-19 disease is caused by a virus. It's one of the types of coronaviruses. Coronavirus is a group of viruses, but COVID-19 is one of the viruses. The specific virus that causes COVID-19 disease is called SARS-CoV-2 virus. And so that's the virus that is causing this respiratory tract infection. And so it's more like the common cold that we have been having, but there are a few differences that we'll talk about later. But most importantly, it is a viral infection which causes infection of the airway. And the most important route of transmission of COVID-19 disease is through droplet infection. When I say droplet infection, it means if you're seated close to someone and they cough, or they talk like the way we are talking, or they sneeze. We go to churches, people sing. If someone is singing, there's that small droplets from the mouth or the nose that comes out. If it lands on you, then it is capable of causing infection. That's what we call droplet infection. It directly drops on you and then causes infection. But in this case, it should land on your face, and not just anywhere on your face, either on your mouth, your nose, or your eyes. These are places which have mucous membranes, and mucous membranes are soft tissues that are capable of making the virus get inside your system.
Okay, initially there were questions on whether the virus is airborne. Were they ruled out?
I was actually coming to that. So the other way that COVID-19 disease can be transmitted is through contact. If you touch somewhere, for example, let's say someone coughed on this table, you came and touched it, and then using your unwashed hand, you touch anywhere around your face, you can get infected, because that means you're carrying the virus physically from that surface onto your mucous membranes. So what you're talking about as being airborne. Airborne means the virus being able to survive in the air around us for a long period of time. The current stand is that the only possibility of airborne infection is in situations that exist mostly in hospital settings, where there is what we call aerosolization. Aerosolization means procedures that make small particles to spread in the air. It is said to be particles which are less than 5 micrometers in diameter. That means they're really small, and they're very light, so they can stay in the air for a long period of time. That is the only situation where airborne infection is possible. But in the general public, where you're walking on the street, someone is coughing, that is not possible.
All right.
And so that means airborne infection is only possible in aerosolization situations, which is mostly in hospital settings. And that means procedures like when you are being given oxygen, when they are doing nebulization, and some of the others, yeah.
Thank you to Dr. Odongo. Now to the next question, we have groups of people who are more susceptible to being infected by COVID-19, and some of these groups develop more severe symptoms than others. Would you please tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I must start by saying that the overall risk of getting COVID-19 disease infection is for everyone. Everyone in the population can get infected with COVID-19 disease. But there are a group of people who are at risk of getting more severe infections, more severe disease, and that means these are people who are at risk of dying more easily. So majorly there are those with comorbidities. Comorbidities mean you have other infections. You have, for example, diabetes mellitus, you have hypertension, you have a heart disease, or you have another form of a lung condition, like asthma, like COPD. These are infections that if you already have them and then you get to contract COVID-19 disease, it puts you at risk of getting more severe form of the infection. It is because your body is not well placed to handle this infection, like someone who doesn't have those infections. Just take, for example, COPD, a disease of the lung. COVID-19 disease affects majorly your lung, the airway, starting from all the way from the nose up to the downmost part of the lungs. Your lung already has a problem, and you are again bringing COVID-19 disease in the same lung. That means that lung will suffer more damage. So this, that is comorbidities. And then another group of people are those who are elderly. Those who are above the age of 65 years, but even those above the age of 40, 45, they also get more severe disease at some point, but those above the age of 65 are the people who get mostly more severe infection. It's because this is still bringing back to how your body is able to handle the infection, your body immunity, and so these people get more severe infection usually.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, since the outbreak of the pandemic, we have witnessed some countries recording fewer cases to compared to other countries across the world. What's your take about that?
Well, I think there has been so much information about why, especially Africa, is having fewer incidences, fewer level of infection than the Western countries like America and then the UK. So much information has been talked about, but I think basically you realize that in the Western countries, there is a very high population of the elderly. Their life expectancy is much higher than ours. Their population above the age of 65, age of 70, are much higher than that same bracket of population in Africa. So that means if the rate of infection could be the same, but you remember in Africa there are people who are getting just a form of a common cold and it goes away. Someone doesn't get into going to be admitted into ICU, and so that means that percentage of elderly population puts them at risk of getting more severe infection. And so the other reason that personally I think is because our weather is a bit better in terms of how cold we are and how hot we are. Like we will talk about later, one of the ways of preventing COVID-19 disease is if you temperature. A higher temperature is capable of killing the virus much more easily. And so that means as we compare temperature in those other countries and ours, I think it puts us at a better state of being able to...
So what means that the virus is affected by the differences, the climatic and weather conditions?
I think so. I think so. It has not been proven though, but these are thinking that comes to mind. Yeah.
All right. So now, what could be the differences? What are the differences? Because some people might develop a common cold and they cannot really tell if this is the symptoms of COVID-19 or not. What are the differences between the symptoms of coronavirus, or rather COVID-19, and the common cold or flu?
Yeah, I think to start with, both the common cold that we have had all along and then the current coronavirus infection, all of them affect the airway. And so the symptoms are more or less the same. But the difference comes in how severe they affect someone. Because the common cold, you get a running nose, maybe a bit of a headache, a bit of a sore throat, a bit of itching in the nose. And with or without medication, sometimes it goes away. But of course, for some people, you'll have to take maybe a Panadol or some antihistamine. But for coronavirus, most of the time, in addition to these other symptoms we've talked about for the common cold, many people get a fever. Many people get a fever. For a common cold, sometimes you don't get a fever, but you can also get a fever with a common cold. The difference is the severity. The fever for coronavirus is usually much higher. Though we have had very mild cases, which is really difficult. For the mild cases of coronavirus infection, it's very difficult to completely differentiate it from the common cold. But for the severe cases, it's the one that which obviously makes you know, I think this is something different. You develop a cough, a chest pain. Most people come with difficulties in breathing. You know, the fever is very high. They have a headache, general body weakness. And so some of those extreme symptoms are not part of a common cold. That's basically what raises our antenna to start to think, I think this is not the common cold that has been there.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, across the world, we have countries reporting resurgence of cases, second waves. What could be the precursor of the resurgences in cases of infection?
I think my take on that is basically how we are handling the infection as a people. When the first case was reported in Kenya in March, people panicked. Everyone didn't know what to do. Everyone had in mind, I don't think this should have happened. So people practiced the basic principles which has been talked about with all their hearts. People did their best. But as time went on, all these other communications that, oh, Africa is not so badly affected, you know, this made people to lose focus. People are no longer observing the basic precautions. For example, if you walk to the CBD, how many people do you find with masks? Maybe most of them. But tell me, how many of them are putting on those masks properly?
Very few.
Very few.
Yeah.
Most of them are putting on a mask. It is right below the nose. Basically, they are not putting on a mask. People have been told, do not unnecessarily overcrowd. People are walking into the markets, into the supermarkets. People are going, you know, to do all these things. People are still overcrowding. You've been, maybe you've used one of the matatus recently. Sometimes by the time they are leaving where they are living, there is social distancing, there is that adequate space. But by the time they are reaching their destination, sometimes the capacity is more than the seats available. So all these are practices that makes us think we are not disciplined in observing the basic principles, the basic practices which should protect us from the infection. And that means this is going to make us not control the infection the way we should. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We are taking a very brief break. We'll be right back with more on COVID-19 pandemic. This is Around the Table Show. Stay tuned.
Coronavirus COVID-19 is a respiratory virus spreading across the world. The infection is spread from droplets of coughing and sneezing of an infected person, touching or shaking hands, or being in contact with contaminated surfaces or objects with the virus. The signs and symptoms are fever, coughing, headache, body ache, difficulty in breathing. The disease can be prevented by regularly washing hands with soap and running water. Avoid close contact with people who have flu-like symptoms. Avoid handshake, hugs, and kissing. Also, protect yourself by covering your mouth or nose using a disposable tissue while coughing or sneezing. If you experience these symptoms and you had traveled or been in contact with a person from a country reporting COVID-19, you should isolate yourself for 14 days and seek immediate medical attention or report to the nearest health center. This message has been brought to you by the government of Kenya and its partners. For accurate information on COVID-19, dial *719# or call 719. Follow us on Twitter at MOH_Kenya, at spokesperson GOK, at WHO.
Amri za Mungu. Ndimi Bwana Mungu wako. Usiabudu miungu wengine. Usilitaje bure jina la Mungu wako. Shika kitakatifu siku ya Mungu. Waheshimu baba na mama, upate miaka mingi na heri duniani. Usiue. Usizini. Usiibe. Usiseme uongo. Usitamani mwanamke asiye mke wako. Usitamani mali ya mtu mwingine. Amri za Mungu.
Kupata
amri za Mungu.
Kama sikiza tune yako, bonyeza neno sikiza likifuatwa na nambari 738100251.
Welcome back to Around the Table show. Today, being the 4th day of December 2020, we are discussing COVID-19 pandemic with Dr. Daniel Odongo from Mater Misericordia Hospital. Now, before we went for a break, we had an overview about COVID-19, what it is, how it's transmitted, some of the symptoms, but we need to go into details because we have had cases of people collapsing and dying in public service vehicles. Doctor, what can you say about that in as far as symptoms and being asymptomatic is concerned?
Well, I think for anyone with coronavirus to reach the point of dying, they should have had a symptom. Mm-hmm. They should have had something, maybe a cough, maybe a fever, or a chest pain. But you see, there is still a lot of stigma coming with being diagnosed with COVID-19 disease. Mm-hmm. So if anyone is fearing the stigma, then they can hide the information. They fail to talk about they have a cough. They can refuse to talk about they have a fever. Mm-hmm. And so it is possible for someone to get a severe disease, and then if they have not talked about it, mm-hmm. it can end up causing death. And so to me, I think this could be a case of someone who did not disclose to anyone that they are sick. Mm-hmm. And it's possibly maybe someone who had a comorbidity. They have other infections. Mm-hmm. So it makes them at risk of easily, succumbing to COVID-19 disease. Mm-hmm. And so that brings me to the symptoms of COVID-19 disease. We earlier on had spoken something about it, but I just want to mention that COVID-19 disease has a wide spectrum of symptomatology. There are those who have very mild infection. They just have a bit of a cough, a bit of a running nose for 1 or 2 days, and then it goes away without anything, without a Panadol, without a cetirizine, without anything. That's very mild disease. Then there are those who get moderately severe. They get a cough, a fever, a chest pain, maybe a bit of difficulties in breathing, body weakness, body pains, and then they go to the hospital. They get medication, maybe a Panadol for the fever, for the symptoms. They get treated and they get well. That's moderately severe infection. Then there are those who get very severe infections. Those become very critically ill and they end up in critical care. And these are the percentage of people who end up dying. So there is a very small percentage, maybe about 1.5% of people who get very severe infection and then they end up succumbing. And so this is not a reason why we should relax observing the measures. We should still observe the measures because you could get a mild infection, but you can end up getting to infect someone who can get a very severe infection. So we shouldn't think about ourselves. We should not be selfish. You don't think about myself as Odongo. I should think about myself and those around us.
They say prevention is better than cure. Now, what are some of the preventive measures of COVID-19 virus?
Yeah, so I think this is going to be just a reminder. It has been talked about over and over.
Sure.
And most of them are not things which are new. They are things we have practiced before. But just because coronavirus disease spreads majorly through these routes, that's why it's being emphasized. And it has been emphasized for a long time. Hand washing, this is very basic. There's no home in Kenya with no water. Washing hands. But how are we washing our hands? You need to wash your hands all the time after touching anything because you don't know where you have touched. You could touch this table, but someone had coughed maybe 5 minutes ago, and then the droplet is there. You've touched it, you take it to your face, you get infected. So you touch any surface, wash your hand as much as you can. There's no harm in washing your hands 3 times in 10 minutes, as long as you think your hand could have picked up any germ. We have alcohol-based hand rubs, the sanitizers that people walk around with. They are mostly in the hospital settings. It is very important to know that that is one of the ways of preventing the transmission. You do adequate and proper hand rub with the antiseptic hand wash. But remember that if your hand is obviously dirty, you can't use that hand rub because you're making your hand even dirtier. You will not achieve the aim of killing the virus. So if your hand is obviously dirty, find somewhere, wash your hands with running water and soap. The other thing that has been enforced of late is the use of face covering, putting on a face mask. It is very important because the infection is through droplet majorly. That means if you cover your face and when you're coughing, you cough inside there, you talk with it on your face, there's very little possibility of that droplet getting out. Even if someone is without a mask, but you're with a mask, you still get some level of protection. So face covering using a face mask is one of the important ways. Physical distancing is extremely important. At least 1 meter away from anyone who is not from your household. It's not your wife, not your child, not your father. You don't stay with them in the same house. Stay away from them at least 1 meter apart so that even if you're talking to them, even if they cough, the droplet cannot fall on you. And this is one of the things that it has not been followed very well. People are still crowding. People are sitting in matatos, almost full capacity. And this is one of the things which is causing the infection not to go away.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Now, what are some of the available treatment options for COVID-19? Because we have had the recovery cases even way before people started coming up with organic and other scientifically tested options for treatment.
So, majorly, we have already said COVID-19 disease is caused by a virus. Specific treatment for SARS-CoV-2 virus has not been discovered to date. This is very important because people have asked me personally that they've had other people have gotten cured of COVID-19 disease. And yet at the same time we are saying it's a viral infection. How did that happen? This is the thing. COVID-19 disease is caused by SARS-CoV-2, which is a virus, just like the virus that causes the common cold. Your body, if strong enough, that means if your immunity is good enough, is capable of fighting the virus and getting rid of it. And so the only thing that we do in hospitals is to support your body system, to support your body to be able to fight the infection by itself. We do not give medication to kill SARS-CoV-2 virus from your system, but we give you medication to make you stronger, to make you live longer, so that your immunity can do what it's supposed to do, can defeat the virus. So what we do is symptomatic management. If you have a fever, we give you medication for the fever. If you have a cough, we treat the cough. You have a chest pain, we treat the pain. If you are critically ill, you need critical care, we take you to ICU and then support your system. This is just in a way that we support your system so that your body is able to take care of the infection. So everything around treatment of COVID-19 disease for now is symptomatic management. But I'm also, I think one of the breakthroughs which has happened is that in the past few days, one of the companies in the UK, Pfizer, has announced they've produced a vaccine, which has actually been approved by the UK government. And they're saying in the next few days or a few weeks, the vaccine will be available for use. But until then, we still need to know that it is symptomatic treatment. Specific treatment is not available. But once the vaccine comes, that's going to be a real big breakthrough for us, so that the preventive, we can do vaccination and people get protected from the infection.
Thank you so much. Now, in recent days, we have had a surge in number of cases, say in Kenya, cases of COVID-19. What can be done? What can the public do differently in order to reverse the current trend, the increase in the cases?
Well, I think I will still repeat this about how disciplined we need to be. The basic preventive measures are not new, and they are things we can all afford. And so I think the public needs to be disciplined. We need to stick to what the government is saying. We need to stick to what the medical professionals are saying. If you feel ill for any reason, you have something that makes you feel concerned, please come to the hospital and get checked. And if you think you are exposed, people are walking around everywhere and they've been exposed. And this is helping in spreading the infection. We've just talked about asymptomatic people who still go on spreading the infection. So we should be disciplined. We should observe the basic principles. Sitting in a matatu, put on a mask, and then social distancing should be maintained. If you're at home, if there is no serious reason of going to any crowded place, please stay home. But people are moving everywhere, most of the time without a mask and with no discipline at all. To me, it is basically discipline in observing the basic principles of prevention.
Thank you so much. Maybe before we go to the impact of COVID-19, the social, psychological, and economic impact, could you please tell us more about some of the information that is doing round on social spaces, like for instance that consumption of alcohol can prevent one from getting the virus?
I think this is it's very interesting how people are getting misinformed. People read things on social media. Some people are saying if you drink, you should drink the antiseptic itself. I mean, these are things which have led to death in other places because people hear things, they don't prove it, and they go ahead to practice them. It is very dangerous. First, as far as alcohol is concerned, we've just said alcohol-based hand rub is one of the ways to prevent the infection. You do a hand rub so that your hand is sanitized. I think this is what brought the whole, misconception of if I can rub my hand with alcohol-based antiseptic, then what if I drink? Maybe I'll get better, or even not even get the infection. That's a misconception. You drink, it is going into the GIT, but this is something that is, you're getting it from the air, from someone else. It does not help you. If you want to use alcohol-based hand rub for sanitizing your hand, not for drinking, to prevent the infection. That never happens. The other thing that people have talked about, one of the other myths is if you take ginger, those fruits, the concoction,
ginger, lemon and garlic.
So many people are practicing them. It's not a bad thing. Go ahead and take your ginger, go ahead and take your lemon, but it is not going to protect you from getting the infection.
How does
it does not prevent you from getting the infection. It helps you by giving you the necessary supplements into your body, the vitamins, which help to make your immunity stronger. And that also brings us to medications that some people have run for, vitamin C, zinc. All these are supplements. What do? They help your body to get the vitamins that you need. And basically, in our African setting, someone like you and me, we have enough vitamins in our body. And those vitamins are most of the time only given if you are insufficient of them. And so that means going ahead to take vitamins, vitamin C, zinc, will basically not help much in preventing you from getting the infection. If someone is deficient of them, then yes, go ahead and take them. But anyway, people are taking them. Whether you take them or not, it has no effect anyway. So you go ahead and take them, but get to know that you can still get COVID-19 disease. It's not one of the prevention measures.
Thank you, Doctor. There are so many myths and misconceptions that need to be debunked because they misinform the public and make them to opt for wrong choices. Yeah, from conspiracy theories to other beliefs that people put forth that are not actually justified. So maybe next time we'll find a time to go through myths, all the myths regarding COVID-19. Now, maybe briefly tell us about the impact. We've had so many, the COVID-19 pandemic has really affected us, it has affected all the domains of life. So now we have even had cases of increase in criminal cases, immorality even among children. How best can we cope with the pandemic and make sure that we mitigate the effects?
Yeah, so COVID-19 disease has had a really great impact on everyone globally. To start with, our social standing has been greatly affected. For example, right now, the number of people to attend a funeral, just a funeral that everyone comes for funeral in the village, you can't do that these days because of social distancing measures. You're supposed to have a limited number of people. And so socially, we are affected. If maybe you stay in town and you feel you could be exposed, you wanted to go to the village to see your parents, you can't go because you risk exposing them to the infection. And so many businesses have broken down. There were lockdowns, there were curfews, and people can't do businesses. Talk about the hospitality business. People are out of business. So this has affected us globally, both in terms of the economy, our social standing. And the other problem I still see with us is the stigma that is still coming with a diagnosis of COVID-19 disease. Someone gets diagnosed with COVID-19 disease. There are cases of people being diagnosed, getting treated in the hospital, they get well, and they are discharged. By the time they go back to their villages, the stigma is just too much. The stigma is still too much. So the community needs to understand that COVID-19 is not a death sentence. Someone gets COVID-19, they get cured. First of all, someone who is stigmatizing another, how sure are you that you didn't get infected already and that you got cured without getting to know? So the stigma is still there, which is something that is still affecting us. And once we learn to live with this until it finally goes. We need to change the way we do things.
Thank you, Daktari. As we wind up, please give us your final remarks before we close this discussion.
I think one of the most important things that I have to say is especially to the young people. Those who are thinking they cannot get severe disease, which is, yes, it is true, most of the young people are getting infected, but before they know it, they are already well. But we are becoming careless. The young people are becoming careless just because they think they cannot get a severe form of the disease. And this is putting other people at risk. You get the infection, and because you're fine, but you get to infect other people, you know? Maybe you even get more careless. You don't even do even the face mask, you don't put on them. You're not doing adequate social distancing. And the worst is, we still go back to our parents in the villages. And, you know, this is a bad thing. They get infected, and they get more severe disease. And where's the source? It is us. So I am asking the young people to be very careful. Because by getting infected and, you know, fighting the infection yourself is not enough. Because at the end of the day, you will infect somebody else who can get a more severe disease and lose their life. And this is important. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daniel Odongo from Mater Misericordia Hospital. Now, that's it from Around the Table show. I remember to always make sure that you verify information that you receive from anyone from the credible sources available, and make sure that you stay safe wherever you are. This too shall pass, but the time with which we will stay with it entirely depends on me and you. So stay safe and follow all the health regulations and guidelines given by the government and the World Health Organizations. Asasha Elizabeth is my name. See you next time. Goodbye.
Coronavirus COVID-19 is a respiratory virus spreading across the world. The infection is spread from droplets of coughing and sneezing of an infected person, touching or shaking hands, or being in contact with contaminated surfaces or objects with the virus. The signs and symptoms are fever, coughing, headache, body ache, difficulty in breathing. The disease can be prevented by regularly washing hands with soap and running water. Avoid close contact with people who have flu-like symptoms. Avoid handshake, hugs, and kissing. Also, protect yourself by covering your mouth or nose using a disposable tissue while coughing or sneezing. If you experience these symptoms and you had traveled or been in contact with a person from a country reporting COVID-19, you should isolate yourself for 14 days and seek immediate medical attention or report to the nearest health center. This message has been brought to you by the Government of Kenya and its partners. For accurate information on COVID-19, dial *719# or call 719. Follow us on Twitter at @MOH_Kenya, @spokesperson GOK, @WHO.